Did you think that writing a memoir would be easy? I did. Eventually, my memoir got published by Three Rivers Press, part of Penguin Random House. But it took me 6 years to write. It wasn't until I coached hundreds of writers over a 17-year period that I realized how many mistakes I was actually making. So to help you make your writing easier, here are 10 brutal truths that I had to learn the hard way. I strongly suggest that you do not skip any one of these principles. By the end of this video, you will have tips for writing a memoir that you won't get anywhere else. You will save yourself years of wasted writing time by avoiding the mistakes it took me decades to learn. Most importantly, you will learn what it takes to write a book that a reader actually loves. So let's get into it. Principle number 1. Okay, let me start by asking you a question. Both of these books are about a person's life. So what is the difference between the two? How is the story they are telling different? Think about this for 5 seconds. Did you figure out the answer? Let's take a look at how these two memoirs are different from each other. Okay, what is the first book about? Well, here it says, My Life on Stage. So this is more or less the story of Dolly Parton's life, or at least her professional life. So the other cover says, From Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail, right? So this is a story about hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. So what is the difference between these two memoirs? Well, famous people can basically tell the story of their entire life. Non-famous people need to tell a specific story. Okay, yes, Cheryl Strayed is pretty famous now, but she wasn't when she wrote Wild. So, principle number 1, stop confusing memoir with autobiography. They are not the same thing. So, keep this in mind. No one wants to hear the entire story of your life if you are a regular guy. Are you interested in this guy's story? His name is Chuck. He was born in New York. His first wife was named Brooke. His second wife was named Denise. He has 5 kids. When he was younger, he was offered a baseball scholarship to the University of Kansas. Not so riveting, right? However, if you're famous, anything you tell us about your life suddenly becomes fascinating. This guy's name is Chuck. He was born in New York. His first wife was named Brooke. His second wife was named Denise. When he was younger, he was offered a baseball scholarship to the University of Kansas. The good news is you don't have to be famous to write a memoir that readers love. Someone with a regular life can write a memoir, can write an incredible memoir. But here's the catch. Your memoir needs to be about something. You have to tell us a story. So think of the last movie you saw. I doubt that it was about a 50-year-old woman and everything she's been through in her life from birth until now. Would you go see that movie? I wouldn't. Okay, so let's take a quick look at some new releases on Netflix. At least these are new releases where I live in the country of Peru. So here's what Ocean's 8 is about. Debbie Ocean gets out of prison bent on stealing a knockout necklace at the Met Gala. She recruits 7 other women to pull off the grand heist. Okay, so it's not everything that Debbie Ocean did from birth until now. There is a story there. Let's look at another one. Bob Trevino likes it. Searching for her absent father online, Lily accidentally befriends a lonely stranger who shares his name, sparking an unlikely but meaningful bond. Okay, again, not a chronicle of Lily's entire life, but rather the story of how Lily befriends a stranger who shares her father's name. So, just like the Netflix descriptions that I just read to you, you need to be able to define your memoir in a single sentence. This is called your premise. Principle number 2, use a premise. So, a premise is a one-sentence description of your memoir that describes your main plot line. Think of it the way Netflix describes a movie. Now, getting to this one sentence description can actually be really hard. I know. So let me help you take it step by step. So, one thing you can do is start by figuring out a time period in your life that you want to write about. So, after I got my first memoir published, my agent wanted me to write another one. Now, one of the editors we'd pitched my first memoir to said to my agent, you know, that woman's family is a gold mine. So my agent suggested that I write a childhood memoir. So got all excited, got to writing, fleshed out 3 chapters, turned them into my agent. Guess what she said to me? Wendy, it's not really about anything. So that leads me to the next brutal truth you need to keep in mind when it comes to writing your memoir. Number 3, make your premise specific. A memoir of my childhood, just not specific enough. A memoir of your travels, make it more specific. So how do you do this? How do you make the premise of your book specific enough? Well, what I suggest is you think about what your narrator wants at the beginning of your book. Do you want to become a chef? Do you want to visit every country in South America? Do you want to adopt a Pomeranian? Aww. It doesn't matter what you want. What is important is that you actually want something. Now, this does 2 things. First of all, it makes sure that your story is specific enough. It also gives your book a sense of a search, which is the key to creating suspense. Whenever your book has a search, your reader is going to keep turning the pages to see how the narrator resolves this search. Do they get what they want? How do they get what they want? That is what creates suspense in your memoir. Principle number 4, make sure your premise includes a search. If you want more examples on how to create a premise for your book, you'll find them in my new book, The Memoir Engineering System. You'll find a link in the description. You'll also learn about the importance of a premise in my free class, The 7 Steps to Structure. Again, you'll find the link in the description. So let's get into another huge trap that I see my clients falling into. So years ago, I worked with a client who was writing a book about the practices of witchcraft in the country of Ghana. Pretty interesting premise for a book, right? I was excited to read this manuscript. So I started reading, and I kept reading, and I read some more. The problem with the book was that the first 5 chapters were all about growing up in Pennsylvania. There was nothing about Ghana. There was nothing about witchcraft. So this leads me to my next principle. Keep in mind that the premise of your book is a promise to your reader. Don't make them wait till chapter 5 to begin fulfilling that promise. So, when I tell my clients that the premise of their book needs to be present in chapter 1, a lot of them push back. Time and time again, a client will say to me, "But Wendy, in order to understand what I was doing in Ghana in the first place, you first need to understand whatever it is you think we need to understand." Let me tell you this, we don't. Look at how Kill Bill starts out. So, as you watch this, are you thinking to yourself, I wonder what city she lives in? Wonder if she was previously married. Do you think she has a master's degree? Wonder if she has a dog. None of this background information matters. We are going to learn everything we need to know as the movie progresses. So what you might be wondering is, what happened to her? And in fact, not knowing the answer is what creates suspense. Does your reader have questions? Well, that's actually a really good thing, because it means they're going to keep reading in order to find the answers. Just start your book. Just start your story. Resist the urge to give us backstory. Your reader simply doesn't need it. So that leads us to principle number 6. Resist the urge to start out your memoir with backstory. Your reader does not want backstory. What do you want? Hopefully your answer is, I want to meet Wendy live. Like how I did that there? Well, you're in luck. I only hold my live mastermind 3 times a year. It is 2 days of learning how to write a memoir, information you will not find anywhere else. You'll find more information in the link in the description. Can't wait to meet you there. Let me tell you about another client I had who had tons of stories that she wanted to get into her book. She was writing this memoir about growing up in the super rich, this billionaire family, and she wanted to talk about all of the abuse she had suffered growing up. So I knew she had a lot. So I asked her to write out all of the scenes that were essential to her book. I asked her to describe each scene in a single sentence and give me a list of the most important scenes in her book. Guess what she did? Well, she did the assignment. She turned in a list that was 30 pages long. Now, remember that each scene was described in a single sentence. Now, she did have lots of great stories, but she needed to let go of some of them. So what do I want you to learn from this example? Well, first of all, I want you to let go of the need to tell all of your stories and cram your entire life into your memoir. But more importantly, what I want you to learn is this. Principle number 7. The simpler your plot, the easier it is to affect your reader emotionally. If you have too much going on in your memoir, you're going to have to race through everything. And believe me, your reader is going to hate your book. So a lot of people worry that they actually don't have enough going on to write an interesting memoir. That is usually not a problem in reality. It's actually much harder to write a good book when you're trying to cram too many stories in. So you need to let go of the idea that you are going to tell everything that happened to you in your life. Remember, this is not an autobiography. Okay. Ready to start writing your memoir? Hold on, Speedy Gonzalez. We have one more task to complete first. So, if you don't do this very important thing before you even start writing your story, you are going to have massive problems later. Let me explain what this problem is with an example. So a couple of years ago, I got this manuscript submission from a woman who was writing a story about this long relationship she'd had with her guru. So here's the summary version of how her story played out. My guru came into my life 20 years ago. 10 years later, I witnessed him pass away. I was prepared for his death because he taught me about it when we first met. Later on, he taught me about love. I was 25 years old when my boyfriend cheated on me, and my guru was there for me then. So, what is the problem with the story that we're getting here? Don't know about you, but I am completely lost when it comes to time. So, what did this writer need to do to fix her story? Well, here is my after version. My guru came into my life when I was 25 years old. One of the first things he taught me was not to fear death. 2 years later, my guru was there for me when my boyfriend cheated on me. 8 years later, I watched him pass away. So, what is the principle I am trying to teach you here? Principle number 8, tell your main story chronologically. Okay, I know what you're thinking, but I see other writers jump around in time. They do it in books, they do it in movies. How are these writers doing it? Yes, you can jump around in time. There are rules for doing so. Not knowing how to use chronology in the right way in your book is one of the fastest ways to ruin your memoir before you even begin writing. At the end of this video, I'll leave a link to another video in which I talk a lot more about chronology. For now, I want you to keep 3 things in mind. 1, your book is a search. For a book to have a search, you have to move forward in time. 2, think of your main timeline as the trunk of a tree. It is holding everything up. You can veer off on different branches, different time periods, but you always come back to the trunk. Number 3, before you begin writing, you need to define the main timeline of your book, your trunk, the period of time that will create your search. Number 9, create a present-day timeline that you will always return to. So there is yet another reason that coming up with a present-day timeline is critical. critical before you start writing your memoir. Let me help you explain why with another story from one of my clients. So Lisa had a PhD in literature. She was a college professor who taught people how to write. Now, why am I telling you this? Because I have had multiple clients with PhDs in literature who taught other people how to write, who came to me with help with structure. And I'm telling you this because structure is not intuitive. It is not something you will learn in college. So I was helping Lisa with her structure, and her idea was to structure each of her chapters thematically. So she wanted to do a chapter about her relationship with her mother. She wanted to do another chapter about maids she had had growing up. She wanted to do another chapter on different houses she had lived in as a child. Now, what is the problem with the way Lisa was thinking? The way she planned to structure her memoir meant that her chapters would have overlapping chronology. So, let me help you understand what I mean by this term. Okay, if she did a chapter on her mother, it meant that this chapter was going to cover 14 years in time. So, Chapter 1 would be ages 4 to 18, right? Because Lisa's book starts when she's 4 years old, ends when she's 18 years old, and this whole time her mother is in the picture. If she did the next chapter on the maids she had in her childhood, the time period for Chapter 2 would look like this. So, Chapter 1 would end with her being 18 years old. But now the reader gets to Chapter 2, and we have to go back in time to her being 8 years old. This problem gets even worse in Chapter 3. In Chapter 3, she wanted to talk about different houses she'd lived in. So Chapter 3 is going to cover ages 4 to 18. So Chapter 2 is going to end with her being 14, and then in Chapter 3, we go back to her being 4 years old. So do you see how this destroys any sense of a search in this memoir? Do you start to feel how there's not really a story here? So we're getting information about the narrator's life, but this is not the same thing as a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. This leads us to principle number 10. Figure out the chronology of your chapter before even considering its theme. So using theme in your chapter isn't wrong, but it's not going to work if the theme that you choose destroys your book's chronology. You don't want a theme that is going to overlap chronologically with the next chapter of your book. Okay, that's 10 tips, but I have a bonus tip for you. So let me help you understand it by talking about another mistake I see my clients make. I had one client turn in the outline of her book using the W structure. Another client turned in an outline that looked like the story structure they teach you in StoryGrid. I had another client try to structure her book using the heroine's journey. All of these clients had an incredibly difficult time. They thought that using one of these formulas would help them write their memoir in an easier way, and it just wasn't the case. It made things so much more difficult. What did I tell every single one of these clients? Stop trying to write your memoir like a novel. So a novelist has the ability to make things up. Your challenge as a memoirist is much bigger. What you need to do is scrape away all of the events of your life until what is left over is plot. Forget novel writing formulas. None of them is going to work for you. So principle number 11, stop trying to write your memoir like a novel. So what do you want to do instead? Well, what you want to do is learn the principles of memoir structure. You want your memoir to feel like a novel, but getting there happens in a very different way. If you want to know more about this incredibly important topic, I suggest you watch this video next. I explain why most memoir writers get their structure wrong. You need to think of it in an entirely new way to write a book that works.